Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this workshop brought to you by CloudBees. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting workshop ahead, but before we dive into things, I've got just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording today's session. So if you'd like to follow along, and I'm sure you will be receiving this recording after we finish our live session today. So if you need to revisit to continue following along with the workshop, we'll make this available as soon as we can. If you'd like to get involved with us, get engaged, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you are joining us. If you have specific questions or if you have any issues following along in our workshop today, we do want you to send those into the Q&A panel, as we do have Ian and Chris here to help out and troubleshoot with any issues that may be going on with the workshop. So feel free to contact us for any assistance there through the Q&A tab. We will have a poll that's here toward the front end of our webinar today, so keep an eye out for that as it pops up. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you jump over to the handout section, you will find, I'll go ahead and pin it to the top, but it is a link to our workshop instructions. This is going to be really important if you want to follow along today. So feel free to go ahead and pull that up. We've got some level setting at the beginning, but then we'll be diving right into things. And of course, we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to say hello in the chat, send in your questions, and of course, fill out our post-webinar survey, because we would love to hear your feedback. So moving right into things, our workshop today is titled Managing Continuous Integration at Scale. And I'm joined today by Bill Garrett, Principal Solutions Engineer at CloudBees. I'm also joined by Chris Roble, Principal Solutions Engineer at CloudBees as well. And we also have Ian Kurtz, Sales Engineer at CloudBees. So Ian, Bill, Chris, thank you all so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Bill, do you want to get us diving right into these slides?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Cody. You already introduced us, so I won't read out our names again. I'll just clarify that hey, I'm Bill Garrett. I'm going to be doing most of the presenting today as we go forward. And my colleagues, Chris and Ian, are going to be available for helping people troubleshoot one-on-one. So yeah, I'm going to try to pace the lessons we're conveying today so that everyone who wants to follow along with fingers on keyboard can work the exercises with us in real time. But if you feel like you're stuck, if something's not working, if you have a question, reach out in chat, and Chris and Ian will be available to help you troubleshoot or get over the hump, whatever is causing difficulty. So a lot of people ask, by the way, what is CloudBees, right? CloudBees is a DevSecOps platform company, right? What that means is for the process of getting your product from code to customer, we help you automate, accelerate, and analyze what you're doing. Some of the key capability areas we have are continuous integration, helping you build and test at scale, continuous delivery, putting your code out to the environments where it needs to go, reduce orchestration, helping you promote code across various environments from dev to QA to stage to pre-prod to prod. Of course, analytics that help you benchmark where you are the whole route of the way, feature flag management, and most recently, we've added a continuous compliance capability to our platform. Now, there's a lot of stuff on the screen here, and I promise this is going to be about the end of the salesy type slides I'm going to present today. But I did just want to call out that what we're going to be talking about today is just one piece of the whole platform puzzle from CloudBees, continuous integration. We're going to be talking about our CloudBees CI product, which is like an enterprise-grade version of Jenkins, giving you centralized management to help you manage at scale, where our customers have hundreds or thousands, or even in the biggest cases, tens of thousands of developers working on building products through CI. So we help you scale up to very large scale and manage, automate, and secure your system at scale. Now, I mentioned that CloudBees CI is based on Jenkins. So to kind of help us level set for our presentation, I've got a poll here to find out how familiar are you with Jenkins or with CloudBees CI for that matter, if you've seen us before. So go ahead and take a moment to fill out the survey. Are you a complete neophyte at the system and you're wondering who's Jenkins? Why does Bill keep saying the word Jenkins? Or maybe you've used Jenkins a little bit, but you don't write jobs. So mark B. Or C, you write some jobs and you do some admin work. Right? A lot of people say that, right? Of course, then there's D. You write jobs and do it well. A lot of people are a little concerned. Or maybe you consider yourself a real pro at this, such a pro that Kosuke Kawaguchi, who created Jenkins, and Jesse Glick, one of the biggest open source contributors, they read your blog. Or you're just kind of a nut about Jenkins and you're such a fan, you dress up as the butler. All right, we got some results coming in.
And please do share if you have a blog that Kosuke Kawaguchi and Jesse Glick read. I'm thinking that one result may have been me poking fun at the poll before we started, but would love to know otherwise.
All right, Cody, I guess we should leave it open a little bit longer, but it looks like a lot of people out there are claiming they do butler cosplay. That's like the second most popular answer. Wow.
Looks like you have some company, Bill. It looks like we have a lot of people in that letter B bucket. A lot of people who use it to a certain extent, but may not be developing pipeline workflows.
Yeah, that's good because today's seminar is a good opportunity to learn a bit more about it. As well as I noticed a cluster of people marked option D that you consider yourselves pretty good at writing jobs, administering a server. That's great too, because hey, no matter how good we are, there's always the opportunity to take our skill up to the next level. And we hope that's one of the things that we can convey today. Cody, are we done with the poll? All right.
All right. Looks like all the results we're going to get.
Okay, so by the way, it seemed like there were a bunch of people who marked you're such a fan of Jenkins, you dress up as the butler. And I kind of put that in there as a joke, but it's also kind of the truth because I dress up as the butler. You may have seen me at a, Jenkins World, DevOps World, or a CloudBees event dressed up as the butler. And the first couple times I did it, people would walk up to me and say, "Oh, wow, it's Jenkins the butler in person." They'd say, "You look great. Your tuxedo looks great. Oh, and by the way, I have some questions about Jenkins because you introduced me to someone who's actually smart." And at first I took that as an insult, like, "Hey, you don't think I can answer questions about Jenkins?" But then I realized it was actually a compliment. They were saying I did such a good job. They thought I was a paid actor or maybe even a real butler. No, I'm just a Jenkins fanboy who has fun with cosplay. So, but hey, get ready because the butler's going to serve. All right, so what are we going to do here? Well, let me switch over to some of my other slides and talk a little bit more about the exercises we've got today. There's a bunch of materials that we've got here. We're not going to go through quite everything. We are going to guide you through a few hands-on exercises working with CloudBees CI. You're going to be having an opportunity to work with some repositories in GitHub. You're going to have an opportunity to work with the CloudBees CI software live, and we're going to guide you through those exercises. We're going to do the first few things on this agenda slide here. We're going to do that setup on number 3. We're going to do some templating on number 4. We're going to do some configuration as code work on number 5. The other exercises are there in the lab instructions that we've shared out through the link. You're welcome to go ahead after today's seminar and work some of the remaining exercises if you care to. So as far as what you're doing on your end, again, we designed this workshop so you can follow along hands-on keyboard and work the exercises with us. If you'd rather not do that, if you want to rather just pay attention now and maybe come back later and do the exercises, that's fine also. All the resources we're sharing today are going to be here for the rest of the week. So let's just skip through some of the stuff here. I've already talked a little bit about CloudBees CI and how we help manage Jenkins at scale. I promised wouldn't do too much selling here. So let's talk about how to set up for the workshop today. And here I'm going to switch over to another web page we've got, which is the Getting Started web page. This is the one that's in the handout section. If you click through that link, it's the instructions for the CloudBees CI workshop. This is how you get yourself onboarded to the system. And I'm actually going to do these instructions in real time. So I welcome you to follow along with me. You can either keep this screen share opened in a separate window while you work on GitHub in another window. Or like I said, you can save this for later, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I've already got a GitHub account set up. If you don't, you can set one up quickly for free. But I've already got one set up, so I'm going to go in it there. I'm going to create a new organization, and then I'm going to install a GitHub app in that organization. Right. So right now I'm just previewing what I'm going to do. Right. The instructions are all here in detail for you to follow along on. But now I'm going to switch over, and I'm actually going to do the work. Right. So I'm going to go over to GitHub, and of course they've helpfully logged me out. So I'm going to get my two-factor authentication going here. They always seem to log me out when I'm presenting. All right, so I'm going to go to my user account and organizations. I'm going to create a new organization. The reason that we're going to create a new organization is that when we install the app creates an access path that is scoped to the organization. So this way you don't have to worry about, hey, I've got my company's IP that's accessible to my user account. We're just going to create a new organization, and today's work is going to be siloed in there. Right? So under my profile here on the right, I went to organizations. I'm going to click this button for a new organization. Right? There's different options that GitHub presents you. Free is the right answer. So pick something free, create an organization with a name that you can remember and something that's kind of unique, right? So I'm going to call it Bill-CB, short for CloudBees, and I'm going to put in today's date. Right? I'm going to give it an email. I'm going to say this is a personal account. Accept the terms of service and click next. I can skip the next step here, which is adding members to the organization. I don't need to add other people, so I'm just going to do complete setup. Okay, so now I've got my new organization. If I switch back over to the slides here, or to the workshop page, right, I've gone through a few steps here. So the next step is I've got this CI workshop GitHub app I'm going to install. I can click through this link, but I'm actually just going to copy it and drop it over here on this page. This is going to do two things. It's going to duplicate some repositories to your new organization, and it's also going to set up that access token I was talking about. So I'm going to configure that. Now, when you configure this app, it's important that you pick the organization you just created, right? So if you're like me, you may have a lot of organizations. You have to scroll down through the list and find out where it went, right? Which is the right one. Don't install it in your GitHub account root. Make sure you put it in the organization, and then accept the default settings here and click install. Now, it will take it maybe a minute or two to clone the repositories into your organization. That's because this work goes on a queue on the GitHub side, and it depends on how many servers GitHub has servicing that queue. So in the meantime, I can do something else here just to have some fun with it. Like maybe I go to my profile. I say I want to upload a new picture, or if I got some good pictures. Got some Jenkins pictures. Oh, how about this one? There we go. Kubernetes Captain Jenkins. So I'll just set that here. And of course, it will take it another minute or so for that to reflect as my icon up here on the screen. But I should have that set up pretty soon. And I'll just sit here on my organization page. Actually, I'm going to check my repositories. Oh, look, I have 4 repositories that have been cloned in for me. That's part of what we expect to happen, right? So if you go back to the instructions page here, right, I've installed the workshop app. I've picked the right organization to put it in. I've taken the default options. Then I've given it a little bit of time to come and populate these 4 repositories. Right. So once you've got these 4 repos cloned into your organization, you're good. We're ready to go on to the next step. So with that, I'll pause a bit for the benefit of folks who are doing this on their own end. Hey, could someone who's gotten to this point just drop a message in the chat and let us know that you've been successful?
That would be great. And I'm monitoring the provisioning aspect of this in the background. Looks like Bill's controller has been successfully spun up.
Yeah, so that's actually the third thing that installing this app is doing, is that it's going to create a controller for you, a Jenkins controller inside the CloudBees CI environment. And in the next step, we'll show you how to get access into that system.
And we've already seen one of the biggest benefits of using GitHub apps to copy over these repositories into your organization. These have been based off of a public template, so we can very quickly grab the repositories that we need for a new organization. And once that GitHub app has been installed into your organization, Bill had just mentioned, we have a webhook that will trigger a pipeline within CloudBees CI to ultimately provision your job through configuration as code. So we're already introducing some complexities right off the bat, but that can, as you'll quickly experience, will significantly reduce onboarding time. And I'm seeing right now a couple of other managed controllers being created.
Okay, great. Hey, I'm going to go on to the next step here, and I'll go slow just for the benefit of people who are still catching up with the instructions. Right, so once you've gotten the app installed in your repository, like I said, the third thing it's doing on the back end is it's creating a controller for you. You kind of have your own corner of the world inside CloudBees CI. So after you give that a minute or two to spin up, the next thing you're going to do is connect over to the CloudBees CI cluster. Right, so you've got a link here, and when you log into it, you're going to put in a name which is your GitHub username, right? Not the organization name, but your GitHub username. Right, so let me log out of this account here and come back in. So I'm going to log in with Bill Garrett, capital B, capital G. That's my my GitHub username, and the default password, you can change it later, is going to be the letters CB, as in CloudBees, lowercase, the numbers 2023. Right. So when you log in, you're going to see probably just one controller here, the controller that's being created for you. The reason that I see 3 is that I have some broader privileges in the system right now with my account, so I actually see a couple other controllers. The one that you really care about, though, is the one that has the name of your GitHub organization in it. That was created for you just today while we've been on this webinar. So click through that, and it may take a while to come up because the controller may still be spinning up. And you should see that there's already an object in here, a folder actually, called the pipeline template catalog. This is all part of what has been pre-provisioned for you in the setup that we did. So while we're giving you a moment to catch up with that, I'm going to log back in here as the admin and take a look at what's happening. As the admin, I can see that there's a few other controllers in the system. There's currently about 7 different controllers attached to CloudBees CI. This is part of the scaling that we were talking about, right? Is that instead of having a single Jenkins server living on its own, you can have multiple servers. In this case, we have 7. But we've grown this cluster as big as like 150, maybe close to 200 different controllers, all attached up to this one common piece that we call the CloudBees Operations Center. Think of the Operations Center as kind of like a master over all the controllers. Gives you a single pane of glass contact, both for members of your dev organization to sort of see the world, understand what's going on across the organization, as well as kind of a root of the control plane for your admins to administer common bits of administrative state, whether that's, what is the authentication realm, what are the authorization permission policies for people as they work on the systems, how are data backups done, what are the Kubernetes clusters that we're connected to and namespaces that we can deploy things into. That's all stuff that you can configure here in one place through this operations center, and it's inherited down to all the controllers that are connected. So as I'm talking, it looks like a few of the attendees here have gotten as far as having a controller created. I'll give it another minute or two for folks to catch up with the step-by-step instructions. By the way, as you're trying to connect into your CloudBees controller, if you see this kind of icon, an icon of a server with the red X on it, or a server with a vertical pair of lines, a pause bar icon, right? That means that the controller is still spinning up, right? When I say spinning up, what I mean is that the controller is a service in a container in a pod in Kubernetes, and that pod needs to get provisioned, right? And depending on how many people are using the system, we may even have to auto scale to new Kubernetes worker nodes to have resources to provision all the pods. Then once we provision the pod, there's a Jenkins type application in there. It's a Java, J2EE application that needs to spin up. So the whole process could take anywhere from like a minute to a few minutes, depending on the load on the system. So if that's the situation, if you see the name of your controller and you click through it and you get a wait message, it's okay. It's going to come up in just another moment. Ian, Chris, how does it look like we're doing out there?
Not too shabby. I think based on the amount of people in the workshop today, I would expect to see more controllers spinning up right now. So if you're a little bit behind, don't be afraid to ask a question. Afraid might not be the best word, but don't hesitate, right? If you are running into any issues with regards to creating your GitHub organization, I see another managed controller is spinning up right now. So I want to say about 5 attendees have actually gone through the proper setup. But other than that, if you're still going through it, let us know. In the event that you do not want to go through anything technical today on your own, good news for you is you do not have to, right? You can sit back, enjoy your coffee or your tea, and watch as Bill, Chris, and I kind of step through all of these different labs associated with the workshop. If you do want to go through this on your own at a later date, these environments will be around for the next week or so.
Yeah, and by the way, what's going on here with the CloudBees architecture is, I talked about this new piece that CloudBees introduces called the Operations Center, which gives you a way to sort of have a layer above all those different Jenkins type controllers, right? So you may have a few controllers in your organization, you may have a few dozen, you may have hundreds, right? I've talked to customers and prospects who have literally hundreds of open source Jenkins servers running around their organization. And it gets kind of crazy to manage that many things. So that Operations Center acts as a hub through which everything can be connected. And I should point out something that, these controllers are all independent controllers, right? Different jobs are defined on each one. Different people can have different permissions on each controller. You could even delegate permission out to give, say, team leads or managers admin permissions on just their own controller, even though it's the site admins or the SREs or the platform team who maintains site-wide permissions on the Operations Center. So there's a lot you can do in terms of helping to isolate the workload and to grant people permissions over their own corner of the world with these separate controllers. But with CloudBees CI, there's also the ability to replicate controllers in a replica set in Kubernetes, right? And this is part of a feature we added recently for active clustering, right? So you can take any one of the controllers and you can configure this on a controller by controller basis and create exact replicas of the controller, which share the workload in an active fashion. And that replication on the individual controller level is different from sort of the horizontal scaling we do across the different controllers that have independent workloads in the system. We can come back around later in the program and talk a bit more about the active replication and what some of the use cases are for that. But for now, I want to get back to working on the exercises we put in the agenda for today. Ian, how does it look like we're doing in terms of spinning up controllers? Does it look like we're ready to move on?
I would say that we are probably at the same rate that we were a few minutes ago. I saw a couple of other controllers spin up. With the time that we have remaining, I would say that, yeah, we can push forward, Bill. I just want to emphasize to the audience that, again, if you are experiencing issues, please reach out to Chris or myself in a chat. That could be the public chat, that could be a private message. So we will be here right throughout the remainder of the workshop. But yeah, it looks as though, Bill, that the provisioning has kind of stagnated.
Okay, great. So I'll move into the first exercise then, where we're going to work with one of the unique capabilities in CloudBees CI called pipeline template catalogs. Now, for those of you who've been working with Jenkins for a while, you understand that the idea of templating pipelines is not new, right? There have been options and capabilities for this for several years. But some of the difficulties are that the approaches out there to templating pipelines leave a lot to be desired. So CloudBees has introduced this new capability, template catalogs. So let me see if I have a good slide to kind of talk about this. Yeah, here we go. Right, so templates is the idea is like, look, we want to put some guardrails around what developer teams in the organization are doing. But it's not just putting guardrails to help prevent them from sort of turning Jenkins pipelines into a Wild West. It's also acceleration, right? Because some teams have a lot of Jenkins skill and they can go out and write a great Jenkins pipeline and code it all beautifully. But not every team has that skill or wants to acquire that skill. So by templating pipelines, we make it possible for our developer teams to get going fast. Right, so that's what you do with the CloudBees pipeline template catalog, right? You give developers a simple and direct experience for building a new pipeline. And because it's a catalog, it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a way to sort of understand, look, there's different technology stacks, different deployment environments. Let's create a set of patterns for team to use. Right. So that's what happens here, right, is that the experts in your organization, the DevSecOps folks, the platform engineers, write pipelines and store them in the library. When I say library, what I mean is that's configured inside version control. So it's in a GitHub repository, for example. That's then synced into CloudBees CI so that developers can just click through the CloudBees web interface and create a new pipeline. instead of having to create one from scratch. They just create the job the way they normally would create a job inside Jenkins. Right? And that can also include code for customizing pipelines. And the final cool thing is that every time the team runs a pipeline from a template, it goes and grabs the latest definition of that templated job from the template repo. Right? And that's important because suppose that part of what you've templated is, say, doing a vulnerability scan on a container before you publish it to your container repository. Right? And let's say that Monday this week, a new day zero vulnerability was discovered. And so yesterday afternoon, your security team coded a new penetration test to make sure that your containers aren't vulnerable to that new vulnerability, that new finding, right? And they only published that update to the process yesterday afternoon. So what happens when developers start committing code this morning and it goes through CI, right? Is it running the copy of the process from when they created their pipeline maybe 3 months ago? No, it's actually pulling the latest update as of this morning. So we're going to get going with one of those examples here inside CloudBees CI. I'm going to switch back over to our module 1 instructions here, right? We're the first exercise, pipeline template catalogs. Now, the instructions here are we're kind of from the high level I've just provided. We're going to now go down the weeds and help you see where the template is created. Right? The first thing I'd call your attention to, though, is when you look at the CloudBees CI controller that was created for you, there's already a pipeline template catalog here, right? It's already here. And the reason it's already here is because we put it in there with configuration as code. There's a lot of stuff I'll share about config as code, or CASC for short, but let me come back around to that later. First, I want to talk about what's going on here with this pipeline template. And by the way, you can actually see that configuration as code. You can see the source code that drove this creation inside your GitHub repository. Right, so if I click up there right now, right, I'm going to look inside my config bundle. This is where we store the configuration as code. Right, and it should be here inside my jenkins.yaml file. Yeah, here we go. All right, this is some of the code in my configuration as code library that's actually driving that configuration. So the controller popped up and had this predefined in it. All right, and that code I just navigated to over in GitHub is what's shown here inside this code window in the instructions. Okay. So now let's just go do a few smoke tests on the configuration in our environment, just to make sure that everything came through okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to click into our controller if you're not there already, and then we're going to click on the left-hand navigation for pipeline template catalogs. So here, let me switch my window again and show you in real time what we're doing. All right, so I started up here at Jenkins. I clicked into my controller. Right, I see this option on the left-hand nav, pipeline template catalogs. I'm going to click it there. I see I've got a workshop catalog. Right, I'm just going to take a peek in here. I have like 8 or 9 different pipeline templates available. But I'm also going to look over here at this import log and just check that it imported correctly. And among other things, I'm going to look for a timestamp. Right, so this timestamp is in Eastern time. Of course, I'm in Pacific time, so I've got to add 3. But this looks like it's about right. This ran a little bit ago, about 15, 16 minutes ago for me, when I was creating my controller. So we're good. Especially because I can click here and look at all the templates that have been loaded. And I've got, like I said, 9 different templates here, so that's loaded well. Okay. So like I said, that's just doing a smoke test, first of all, to make sure that everything did come up and is in healthy fashion. Now, the next exercise we're going to do here is set up a folder in your CloudBees CI controller to put some jobs in. And we're going to do something kind of nifty here using one of the many small features of CloudBees CI. And we're going to restrict what we can do in this folder so that developers using it can only create jobs off of templates. Right? We're sort of going to put those guardrails a little more tightly around them and prevent them from having sort of a wild west of Jenkins with creating arbitrary jobs. So I'm going to go back over here to my my controller. I'm going to go up to my breadcrumbs trail, click controller. So I'm at the sort of the root level of my controller. I'm going to do new item. By the way, I'm just following along the instructions, well, as best as I can from memory anyway, that are in the instructions document. So I'm going to create a new thing called config button. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to create template jobs. I'm going to call this a folder, right? Don't get confused by folder template, just create folder. Okay, and click OK. Now, the important thing we want to catch here is scroll down to the bottom for this option, restrict the kind of children in this folder, right? This is that CloudBees specific feature where you can go through a checklist and specify which items are allowed to get created here. The things that you don't select will not be allowed. You can click a few items here on the list. The one that's really important is CloudBees CI configuration bundle, because we're going to use that next. So make sure you enable that. But I could put a couple other things here, say like pick some of these other templates, like the Node.js template, Python, Vue.js, right? Again, the important one is the CI configuration bundle. I invite you to click a few others, and you'll see when you save this and then go into the folder. So you should see template jobs folder up here. Now, when you create a job, look at this. There's just a short list of things that are available for the job type to create. This is a way that cuts down on the confusion for your end users and also puts in place those guardrails I was talking about, right? It restricts what people are allowed to do inside the folders to only the things that you as the admin have approved. Okay. So before I go ahead and create the first thing, right, I'm going to just catch up here on the instructions. Like I said, the instructions here show you how to restrict the objects that can be created in the folder. They show you that, hey, when you go to create a new item, you'll see a reduced list, right? And the next thing we're going to do is actually create a job off of one of those templates. Okay, so this should be caught up to here in the instructions. I'll give it just a moment for people who are still creating their folders. Chris, Ian, how do things look from your end on this? Are we good to move forward?
I would be curious about Chris's thoughts on that.
I think so. Yeah, it looks like we don't have too many questions. Looks like the environments are spinning up and running successfully. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you have any questions, but everybody's looking good as far as we can see.
All right, thanks, guys. Hey, so let me go on and start walking you through the next few instructions here to create a templated job. This is going to be easy, right? Because we're not going to have to write a Jenkins file. We're basically just going to hook a link to one that already exists inside our template library. Right, so I'm going to go back over here where I've started creating a new item. Right, by the way, you don't have to pick the name that we give in the instructions. Instead of calling it config bundle ops, you can call it foobar baz if you wanted. But, you know, why be difficult, I figure. So I'm going to go with a name that's in the instructions. What's important, though, is that you pick the right template for it. So I'm going to pick CloudBees CI bundle. Okay. And when I do that, it's going to go grab information about that template from my template library. And it's got a few parameters that I have to enter correctly. Actually, it's got 3 parameters, and 2 of them are already pre-populated with the right answer as a default. The one I've got to fill in is the name of my GitHub organization. This is partly why I said pick a name that's both unique and not too hard to remember. Of course, I'm not sure I remembered mine exactly, so I'm just going to go back over to GitHub and remember, oh yeah, bill-cb-deck12. So I'm going to put that in here. And click save. Right. By the way, the other stuff in here should be good. The repository name is already pre-configured because this was cloned into your organization. And the credential was already created for you. So the default value here should be good. So I'll save this new job definition. Right. And the first thing it tells me is that the folder is empty. Right. That's to be expected at this point. Because this is a GitHub organization job, it's a multi-branch job, right? So it's going to start scanning all the branches. So it's going to take a moment to go check all the branches in your repository. If you're curious what's going on, you can hit this link over here on the left, scan repository log. That's a log of the scan that happened, right? And you should see some work done in here, right? So if you don't see a log or if this log is blank, maybe give it a moment, first of all. Look to see if there's like a ... that indicates it's still working. Otherwise, you should see output like this that indicates that it's scanned and found 5 different pull request branches. Right? And you see that back here on this page as well for the job, that there's no main branches, there's no master branch right now, but there are 5 PRs. And you actually see those PRs indexed here inside CloudBees CI. Okay. So let me switch back over to the directions page here. Right. So if you follow along with me, you'd already created a job type or a job of the type CloudBees CI configuration bundle. You put in the name of your GitHub organization and left the other 2 parameters at their good defaults. You saved that. And of course, then I went ahead to the very start of the next exercise and just smoke tested that it was okay. All right, so let me just show that. Right. So if we've gotten everything correct into the start of the next exercise here, you've got that scan repository log that shows you that there was scanning, and you're able to see that 5 pull requests got indexed in your job description, and you can see those 5 jobs. And again, this is what your screen looks like inside CloudBees CI if you've been successful up to this point.
So give us a thumbs up if you see what Bill sees on his screen, or kind of a general lay of the land right now. Any concerns, any thoughts? I know we've had a couple of questions that have been very good in their nature. So keep it coming, and we want this to be as interactive as possible.
Right, I'll give it another moment here for folks to catch up with the work up to this point. So hey, just to summarize what we did here with the pipeline template catalog, you'll notice that we didn't spend time writing the pipelines in the templates, right? We just used them, and we saw that it goes pretty fast. You can spin up a new controller with the pipeline templates already pre-configured, already preloaded, and you can create a job. Or when I say you, I mean a developer on an app team can create a job very quickly off of a template. And you as an admin can also put some guardrails around that to limit what developers and their teams are able to do. By the way, if you want to see what's going on inside that template, you've actually got the source code for it inside your GitHub repository. So if you go to GitHub, you're in the right organization, you pick pipeline template catalog repo, right? Look inside templates. There's a directory structure in here. Right, so the one we just instantiated is from this cask bundle job. There's a Jenkins file here. This is basically the Jenkins file that gets run every time someone runs this templated job. And the reason I wanted to sort of dive here into the source code is one question a lot of people ask is they say, well, wait a minute, pipeline template catalogs makes it easy for people to create jobs. We use shared libraries. Isn't that the same thing? And the answer is no, it's not the same thing, and it's not a replacement. It's a situation of 2 things that work even better together, right? You notice the first thing that we do here inside this templated Jenkins file is we load a library, right? A shared library of Jenkins code. And the way I like to describe it is that the shared library approach is an important foundation here. But the one thing that shared libraries don't do is enforce. Right? Shared libraries are kind of an opt-in solution. People can use them if they're aware of them and if they choose to. But what if you, as the site-wide admins, want to put those guardrails around the system, right? Make it so that people can only use what you've built for them, as well as give them a complete Jenkins file, right? Don't say, oh, well, you've got to write the framework of a Jenkins file and load these shared libraries and know how to invoke them, right? No, you give them the completely pre-written templated pipeline, And then on the back end, it takes advantage of the shared libraries that you maintain in your organization. So next, we're going to dig into configuration as code. I talked a little bit about what was going on here. We're going to go into more detail now on how to manage configuration as code with CloudBees CI. So let me switch to some different slides here to kind of talk about what's happening. So first of all, the idea of configuration as code has been around for a few years now. And it's not just in Jenkins or in CloudBees CI. It's a big trend in IT. And the reason is because, frankly, administering a server of any kind of system by logging in as admin and clicking crap in the UI is a terrible idea, right? As probably a lot of you know, when you do things that way, there's no record of what happened. There's no audit around who made a change and when and why. There's, more importantly, there's no rollback, right? If you bung something up on your server by clicking buttons in the web UI, you better hope you have a backup or some way to undo it, right? And of course, the other big thing is it just doesn't scale. I mean, what if you've got a few different servers to maintain? You've got to go replicate the same work in each one. And what if it's not just a few servers, but what if it's 1,000 servers, right? This is why Cask was created and why it's become such a big industry trend, right? The idea is that we take important configuration settings and we store them in source code, right? A human readable text file, and we manage it via an SCM tool, something like GitHub. So we have visibility and auditability and versioning and rollback. Now, open source Jenkins does have configuration as code capabilities in it. They call it JCask, Jenkins Config as Code. Gives you a way to manage your configuration via a YAML file. So then people ask, well, wait a minute, if open source Jenkins has this, what's the diff with CloudBees, right? What does CloudBees do that's better? What CloudBees does that's better is it significantly extends the capabilities of JCask. We give you the ability to manage plugins, to manage the creation of jobs and folders and permissions and credentials and even more stuff. Like, for example, we were able to put that the creation of that pipeline template catalog right in config as code. So it came up from the get-go with your server. We also offer the ability to create parent-child relationships between bundles of YAML files, which helps you with scalability, because what you can do then is take the parts of the configuration that are common across multiple servers and put them in one place. Like say, hey, maybe plugins, right? There might be a list of 30 or 40 plugins that are pretty standard at your company, and everyone needs those, right? So rather than fill up the plugins file for each controller with a list of 30 or 40 common plugins, put them in the parent plugin file, right? Everyone gets them. And then all each individual team has to manage are the few additional plugins they have that make their controller unique from the others. So just a quick walkthrough there of what's going on with CloudBees CI. Now, to kind of get into a deeper level of detail here, I used the word bundle, right? A bundle is a subdirectory structure, basically, into which all these YAML files go. So rather than read this wall of text, I'm going to switch over to my GitHub environment and just show you what's going on. Right, so I'll go back up here to my repositories. Right, and you can follow along with me if you'd like in your own environment. Click on that config bundle. Right, go in the bundle subdirectory. Now, if you were doing this with open source Jenkins, you just have a file like this jenkins.yaml here. Right, it's got some settings in it, But with CloudBees CI, you get the ability to do other stuff, right? You get that plugins file, right? And there's actually going to be more stuff we're even going to add to this bundle. We're going to build out the ability to configure via code. But just an example here right now, you've got the ability to configure these plugins through your CloudBees configuration as code. Okay, so what's our exercise actually going to be? So what we're going to do first is we're going to set up a little bit of automation around the configuration as code bundle, right? And what I mean by automation is, look, you've got the bundle that's going to live in GitHub in your SCM tool. right? And what you want to do is automatically sync those changes so that when you make a commit or a push or a merge up in GitHub, the code gets copied down to Jenkins. So we're going to build the job that's going to sync those changes. By the way, when you install CloudBees CI, there's an option to do that automatically in a default way. But we're going to take a more bespoke approach here just to help you see how some of the gears that turn in the background are working. Right? And then finally, we're going to set this up so that you have to reload to refresh the configuration. Basically reload your server to pull in the changes. That can be automated, and I'll show you where the hook to automate that is. But again, to kind of help you understand how some of the gears mesh and turn together, we're going to do a partial automation here and leave the last step manual. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, just a quick overview. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to that job we just created, right? We're going to go to our pull requests, and we're going to merge the first pull request, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about what's inside that job, what's inside that PR, but you're welcome to follow along with me by using this document if you'd like, or you can watch what I've got on my screen. Kind of two ways I can get there to my PR. I can navigate there through CloudBees, right, with this GitHub link, or I can navigate there through GitHub itself. All right, the way I get there in GitHub is I go back to my repos. This is in the config bundle repo, right? Branches. Oops, no, sorry, pull requests. I want to click on the pull request tab. This is where I would have gotten if I clicked that link that's over inside CloudBees, right? If I click this GitHub link on the left-hand nav, just two different ways to get to the same place. So I'm going to look in here in the GitOps lab updates pull request number 1. Right? What do we do here? I can click on the files changed tab. There's actually a lot of stuff that we changed, right? We added yet another YAML file. YAML, yet another YAML file. Added that to our bundle YAML. And then what we're doing is putting in the creation of folders and jobs into the configuration, right? So now instead of having to just click through the web UI to create folders and jobs, we actually can automate that through YAML. And we're also going to pull in to the basic Jenkins configuration a pod template, right? The pod template will give us a definition of an agent that can be provisioned when we go to run the job. Right? And we're also going to pull in a few additional plugins to set us up for subsequent exercises. So just a quick walkthrough there of what's in this pull request. You don't need to take actions to write code, but what we're going to ask you to do is approve this pull request, merge it. Right? So I clicked over to my conversations tab up here at the top. Got this big green button, merge pull request. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to confirm the merge. Okay. Now, if I switch back over here to CloudBees, right, what I'm going to see is that this pull request has been closed. That's because it got merged. So I'm going to go back up to the job level, config bundle ops, and look over here. I've got activity on the main branch. That's just because new code just arrived in the main branch via this PR being merged. And I can see there's a job actually spinning right now. And if I'm fast enough, I can click in there and actually watch the console. So I can watch this job spin, watch it work. Okay, so it looks like my job is done. And it failed. Anyone else getting a job that fails? By the way, I won't keep you in suspense. This is a planned failure, right? You should see this job run, and you should see it fail with a particular error code. And I'll explain in a moment what's happening here. Pause for a moment here for folks to catch up with merging the PR and watching their job run to completion. Chris, Ian, how do things look from your end?
Pretty good. We've had a number of Q&A or a number of questions, and we've provided a number of good answers. So keep the questions coming. All of the controllers or the instances of Jenkins, everybody's environments look pretty good.
Yeah, and got a good amount of participation as far as people just kind of following along. I know Dennis had a good comment, and I know Lynn has been posting some good questions, so appreciate that, as well as some others in the Q&A chat. So as Chris said, keep them coming. We're looking good.
All right, great. So hey, coming back around to the lab instructions document here, right? We did a walkthrough of what was in the PR. We merged the PR, and our job failed. So the job ran and the job failed. And by the way, if you look in the output log, okay, that didn't highlight very well. Let me actually just switch back to my output log here from my job. This job failed on this command with this error. So by the way, when we're hiring, when I'm hiring, one of the tests I like to give candidates in an interview is show them an example of an error message from like a build and test job and say, hey, explain to me as best as you can, just in English, or whatever language we're speaking, what happened here, right? What caused this failure? So the way I'd answer this is I'd look at this output and I'd say, okay, so we were trying to run a kubectl command, right? And in particular, we were trying to copy files, right? Copy some files into a controller. So basically, we were trying to do something that's kind of admin-y, right? We were trying to push files into the disk that's attached to something. When I say controller, what I mean is that's the CloudBees controller, right? So we're trying to push files into a pod in Kubernetes. And you might imagine that there's some permissions around that. You can't just have everyone writing files into the storage that's used by the pods. And that's what happened here, right? We got a forbidden error. We lacked permissions, right? So literally what was going on here is if I go back to this diagram, right? We had the configuration as code bundle in GitHub. We pushed a change. We merged that PR. Now we're syncing the changes. And that changes mean, hey, a webhook gets triggered into CloudBees CI, and we're trying to copy files into the operations center because the operations center is helping manage the configuration of all these controllers. Well, the job that ran as your user or the job that ran as my user, Bill Garrett, doesn't have permissions to go change the state on the operations center. That's a privileged operation, right? We can't do it. We don't have the permissions. So there's kind of two ways that we could fix this problem. One is we could give everyone permissions to do admin stuff on the operations center. Yeah, that's a terrible idea. I agree, right? We need some way to give people the benefit of privileged access, but only for specific things, right? So that's actually the next step that we've got here is we're going to put in a different type of code that's going to give us that special case privileged access. And we're going to do that with something called CloudBees collaboration. Right? This is another feature that's in CloudBees CI. Right? It's called cross-team collaboration, actually. Sorry, I slipped up on the title there. It's a way of triggering one job from another job. And again, job triggering is something that's been available in open source Jenkins for a long time, right? One job can trigger another job, can trigger another job. There's a few problems with this, though. One is that it's very linear. Another is that it kind of gets the permissions requirements backwards in the sense of the calling job has to have permissions on the called job. Right? So if what you're trying to do is run a job that runs in a high privilege environment, you have to give people control over the high privilege job, which that's not really what you want to do. So for this use case and for a lot of others as well, we have cross-team collaboration as a new capability, which lets you set up sort of a pub-sub, a publisher-subscriber model with jobs inside CloudBees CI. So one job, what we can think of as the upstream job, wants to trigger other jobs, right? So that's the job that you just ran or that you're going to run. With the code we're going to put in, it's going to publish an event on a message bus in CloudBees CI, and then other jobs can listen for that message. So there's going to be a high privilege job that's going to listen for that message. And when it gets the call from your job, it's going to know it needs to run. But that job runs in a high privilege environment, but you don't get, or you don't have to be given permissions on that job itself, right? You don't get to change that job. You don't get to take the credential it uses and go create arbitrary code with it. All you get to do is safely, cleanly invoke it with the parameters you pass in and that it knows how to read. Okay. So what's that actually going to look like? There's a code box here, right? What we're going to do with this code box is we're going to navigate into GitHub. And by the way, the instructions here show you that we're going to navigate into our cask bundle, the Jenkins file, right? And we're going to change the code in there, right? So I'm going to queue that up right now. Oops. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place here. Give me a second. So the reason I wanted to sort of call out where we are, we need to be in the pipeline template catalog, right? So as I go over here to GitHub, I'm in the wrong repository right now. So I'm going to go back up to the top level. I'm going to go into pipeline template catalog, right? Because what happened is the template job was bad, right? It was the template job that was bad. So we're going to fix the template. So I'm going to go into the template subdirectory, cask bundle, Jenkins file, right? So the path I've got up here now in my code browser matches what I see here in the instructions document. Now, rather than just try to edit the code in that file, I'm just going to do a whole copy replace. So I've got this little icon here in the upper right on this dark background text. That's going to copy this whole job to the clipboard. So now when I go over here, I'm going to edit with the pencil icon. And instead of just trying to edit the right lines here, I'm just going to copy paste in the whole new file, right? So notice, by the way, what happened here was I had these instructions that previously were calling some shell commands with a kubectl, right? That was the admin type privilege that I didn't have. And now I'm going to paste in this new stuff that uses the CloudBees cross-team collaboration, right? It's going to have this publish event trigger in it. And I'm going to commit changes. And I'm going to call it phone a friend, right? Because that's basically what's happening here, right? If you don't have permissions to do something, phone a friend who does. Okay, so note I've made that change directly to my code, but I just did a copy paste from the instructions over here. Okay. Now that I've done that, though, I'm going to need to rebuild my job. So if I go back over to CloudBees, right, I've got my job here that failed. I'm going to go back up to the main branch. I'm going to click Build Now. So if everything's gone correctly, this job will run to completion and it will run successfully. Of course, something else I can check in the meantime, just because, you know, if you've been a system administrator long enough, you have a certain amount of healthy paranoia. Right? I'm going to go up to my controller and I'm going to check my pipeline templates, right? Make sure that they caught the update. Right? So I'm going to check that catalog import log. And I'm going to look at the timestamp here. Right? Of course, this timestamp is for the first import. I'm going to see if there was a more recent import, and look at that. There was an import from about a minute ago, right? So that means that when I made the change to the template up in GitHub, it did get synced automatically down to my server, right? So my job is, when I run the job, it's able to run the most recent copy of that template. So now I'm going to navigate back over to my job that's in flight. Oh, wait, looks like it finished already. Let's click and see what happened. Yep. So now when I look at the log, right, the log ends with this notification here that it's publishing an event on the JSON bus. Now, that's because it goes through a message bus and it triggers another job, and there could be a lot of people doing this. There may be a little bit of a lag before the code is ready. But this is basically this is helping us automate that code from the GitHub environment into the CloudBees environment so that the new changes to our server configuration become available. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, by the way. If you have questions or if you're still trying to work on it, please reach out to us on the chat for help. Chris, Ian, I'm curious how things look from your end. Are people basically getting through with this, or folks having challenges?
Doesn't look like any challenges right now. People are soaking in a lot of the content that you're putting down, with respect to some of the real world use cases that pipeline templates might be able to offer their team or organization, and starting to see how configuration as code plays into really the overall sustainability of the CloudBees CI solution, whether we are using configuration as code to create entire pipeline template catalogs. And so we can kind of distribute those across a large scale cluster as teams might need them. There have been a significant amount of enhancements made to configuration as code over the last several months, in as far as our support for defining your bundles on particular branches in GitHub or Bitbucket, the different types of ways to manage bundles has been matured over the last year or so, and we will continue to do so. So as we see in a modern architecture, this workshop environment that we're using is running on GKE, and it actually makes a lot of the overhead associated with managing bundles and distributing bundles, updating the content within a particular bundle, whether that is a plugin or a pipeline, much more streamlined through the use of something like kubectl on the command line. But really happy that everyone's kind of seeing this in action, and we'll continue to field the chat for questions.
All right, great. So after your configure job runs to completion, the next thing that happens, and this is where there could be a little bit of a lag based on system load, is that the updated bundle is available for you to sync up into your controller. All right, so this is that last step that I told you can be automated, but we're going to leave it manual for now, just so that you can kind of see how all the pieces come together. So the way you do that is you go over to your controller's top level. You should see the Manage Jenkins link on the left. Click in there. Look for the control panel to, sorry, I just went past it. Configuration as code, export and update. Click into that control panel. And then you'll click on bundle update. And you should see that a new bundle is available here. Now, you can go ahead and click reload configuration, but I also want to sort of call out some information on what else is available here, right? Because sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, so the configuration as code files you're showing me are huge. How do I get started, right? One way you can get started is at any point you can look inside the system and see, or actually interrogate the system. Hey, as I have the system configured now, what would that config bundle look like, right? Like, hey, for my role-based access control, what does that look like as code based on what I've already configured in the system? So you can click a link here and it will actually show you, hey, this is what the code looks like on the back end. And you can take this as an example to use to put into your source control for kind of like your first version of Cask. So this is a way you can kind of bootstrap a code-based configuration from a live configuration that you've already configured and tuned to your liking. Right, but for now, go ahead to that bundle update. And by the way, you may notice that this bell icon in your admin bar at the top appears with the blue number 1. right? That's actually a monitor that runs in the background. If you run your jaw, as long as I did, and talk instead of doing stuff, there's a polling interval. I forget how long it is. I think it might be 20 minutes or something. You will actually spot that there's an update waiting for you, and it will flag you. So you can come over here and reload that configuration. So I'll do that now. And once I've reloaded that configuration, if I go back up here to my controller, a couple things are different. First of all, this welcome message is different, right? The welcome message doesn't change the behavior of the system, but we do actually roll forward the version number in this message string every single time with all of our ready to PRs, just so you can see, like, hey, did the new code come in? Yeah, it did. It's version 2. And in addition, you should also see a new tool over here on the left-hand nav for pipeline policies, right? We added the plugin to add pipeline policies as part of this config change. So you should see this now. It wasn't there before. And by the way, you're welcome to click on pipeline policies. You're not going to see anything yet because we haven't actually created policies. That's going to be part of the next exercise. But you should at least see the hook for it there and be able to get to a screen like this that just shows you there's a nil list at the moment. By the way, if you're looking at what are these flags up here in this title bar, you see there's also this shield with a red flag on it, right? What's going on there? This actually goes into another part of what's unique about CloudBees CI, which is something called the CloudBees Assurance Program, or CAP for short. CAP is a collection of plugins that CloudBees does additional testing on over and above what the open source Jenkins community does. Right? So, and with the plugins that are in this program, we have about 200 plugins in this program. We also help you monitor that those plugins are installed at the correct version inside your CloudBees CI controllers. Right, so as I scroll down this list here, these are all the plugins I'm using whose version is automatically monitored by this plugin manager plugin we have. It's called Beekeeper, right? Because we're CloudBees, so we make bee puns about things. The Beekeeper is helping implement the CloudBees Assurance Program here inside CloudBees CI. So it's helping us make sure that these plugins are installed at the latest tested correct version. And Beekeeper does a bunch of other cool stuff as well. Like it helps keep us aware of when updates are available, right? So for example, it's giving me a notice that there's there's a new security fix available, right? And I can click through that and get more information, get rel notes and things like that. It also tells me that, hey, if I'm going to do an upgrade, it actually shows me a simulation of all the plugin versions that will get pulled in as updates, along with taking the base update of CloudBees CI. So I've got a lot of information here to help me as an administrator manage my environment configuration better and also plan updates, ideally to make them boring. And frankly, if you're an admin who's ever had to do updates, boring is exciting. All right. So, hey, I've been talking here to take a little bit more time just for folks to finish. I'm curious how things are looking from the attendee point of view. Ian, Chris, what are you seeing?
I wish I knew what I was seeing. If you have any updates, though, with respect to the first couple of labs that we've been through, I know Dennis had to drop. He provided some good feedback. He liked seeing you step through this in real time, Bill. So he provided us with some good input, and we're kind of just having some good ongoing conversation in the public chat with some of the other attendees. But yes, please do let us know, what you're taking away from the first couple of labs that we've been through. And if you are running into any issues, if you've completed them, we'd love to know.
I have to imagine people were very impressed with the configuration as code capability, especially being able to manage plugins as code. What plugins are installed in your instance? What plugins are installed in your version of Jenkins on your controller? instead of having to manually do that, you just saw in the lab, you just did in the lab, how you can have a plugin be installed with config as code. So that is an extremely powerful concept.
Yeah, great point, Chris. And just to help illustrate how these pieces come together, right? How configuration as code gets even better with the CloudBees assurance program is when I look at my plugins.yaml file here, notice that I'm just listing by name all the plugins I want to install. I don't have to figure out when I'm configuring the server what version is the correct version, right? The correct version is picked automatically by the CloudBees assurance program. Right, so as the manager of an individual controller, right, as a team lead, administering my own little corner of the world, I don't have to stay on top of the updates in a universe of like 1,900 Jenkins plugins, or even just like the 200 my team uses. I have a lot of confidence here, but I can just pick the plugins by name, and CloudBees will help me manage them at the correct version. Okay, so hey, coming back up for air here, what we've done is we've set up configuration as code. We've set up GitOps for configuration as code. Right, so we put some automation around it so that we can make changes to the configuration as code. A job syncs that information down to the controller, and we prove that we can merge a pull request and successfully get that configuration change put through to our controller. Excuse me. So the next exercise is pipeline policies. I think this is the last exercise we're going to do for the day. It won't take very long. I'll give it just another moment before we start it for folks who are catching up. Pipeline policies is another one of those showcase features that are unique to CloudBees CI. And of course, there's plenty more features that we don't have time to get to today. Again, if you go back to the documentation here, right, there's module 1, module 2. There's actually like 10 different exercises here. This information is going to stay up online. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen today and you want more, well, one, you could reach out to us and inquire, or number 2, you could just keep on working through the exercises here. There's a lot more of it you can look at. But the next thing we're going to work on is pipeline policies. So what is a policy? Well, again, to the idea of putting guardrails around what developers and developer teams in your organization are able to do. Pipeline templates were a way that you could give developer teams access to pre-written pipelines, which both helps them get going faster as well as helps them have more consistent, compliant pipelines. But sometimes you have teams that say, look, what we're doing is unique within the organization. We need to write our own pipeline. And that's fine. You can allow that too. And CloudBees pipeline policies are another tool available in the toolbox to help you put some meaningful guardrails around that process. Right? So you can let teams write their own pipelines from scratch, but you can just put some basic safeguards around it. And that's what this pipeline policy capability is all about. Now, today there's 4 different policies that are supported, and this is a list that will grow over time. We have some basic policies here around putting timeouts inside jobs. Right? The reason why you want to do that, by the way, is if someone has a job that is stuck, like it's hung on a resource, or maybe it has a user input step, right? Suppose someone commits code on Friday at 5:30 p.m. and goes home for the weekend, and one of the steps inside the job says, "Oh, ask the product manager if it's okay to deploy this to the QA environment." Well, oops, that person has gone home for the weekend, and so this job could be in a hung state, waiting for input, consuming resources, blocking other stuff from running. And a timeout is a way to help take care of that, right? For example, if someone doesn't approve the job in an hour, kill it, right? Let them start it again and do another approval. So that's what we're going to do here in this lab with enforcing timeouts as a matter of policy. So if I come back over here, right, what we're going to start with is doing another configuration as code update. So we're going to go over to our GitHub environment. We're going to find pull request number 2, pipeline policies lab updates, and we're going to merge that PR. Right, so let me go take a look at that on the main screen here. I'll go into my config bundle. I'll go to my, nope, sorry, keep hitting the wrong tab. I'm going to go to pull requests. I'm going to go to pipeline policies lab updates. I'm just going to take a moment to look at what we're changing here. Right, so we're changing this version number. Not super important, but it's something we do. We're changing the system message. Remember, I talked about that before. Kind of a visual clue that we're in the right place. We've got the right version. We're just going to add a simple policy definition. That's what's here in this green. Right, we're going to create a timeout policy and say, hey, pipelines have to set a timeout that's no greater than 30 minutes. So those are the changes that we've got ready. So I'm going to go back over to the conversation tab and click the green button for merge pull request. Now that change will go through. And by the way, if I click back over here to my controller fast enough, I should be able to see my my sync job running, my config bundle ops job. Look there. Okay, I caught it. Right, this job is running. It's pulling the code from GitHub and it's passing it through that message passing bus over to my high privilege job that's going to copy the files. So I'm going to give it another minute or so to finish up with that task. When that's done, then I should be able to sync the bundle into my server. So I'm just going to do a refresh on the configuration at that point. And again, that refresh is something that we could automate. Right? Let me see if I can show you where we could automate that. So remember, I did that inside, the job definition is inside my template catalog. So I've got this cask bundle job. It's templated. I'm going to look in here at what's happening. So when I pass a message, I send some parameters through the JSON. And one of those parameters is called auto reload. And I'm saying to false. Right? That's why I have to go to that control panel page in Manage Jenkins and click reload configuration, because I didn't set up auto reload. But if I change this to auto reload true, then the configuration would get applied automatically as soon as it's synced down from version control. Just to kind of share the math on that, some people would say, hey, great, shouldn't we automate everything we can? The reason why it's not just a heck yeah is when it comes to administering the version of the server, sometimes you actually want that to be controlled by a human decision, right? Sometimes you don't want to be surprised when the configuration of a server changes underneath you. You want that to be a choice, like, okay, I'm ready to apply the configuration, let's go and do it. And of course, that can also be tied into additional validations and testing and stuff like that. But I'm just kind of explaining that there are good reasons in sysadmin work why you don't want to just apply changes automatically in all cases. All right, so while I've been talking, that job is finished. So now I'll go back over to my controller page. I'll go into Manage Jenkins. CloudBees configuration as code, update. And I should have a bundle update here. If yours doesn't appear here in the blue right away, it's okay. Give it a little bit of time, hit that refresh button every few seconds. When it's available, click Reload Configuration. And then when you go back to the controller's top page, you should see that we're up to version number 3. That was one of the diffs that we had inside the pull request that we merged. The other diff, by the way, is when you click Pipeline Policies, you're actually going to see that there's a policy filled out here now, right? Again, with configuration as code, this policy is something we could have created through the web UI. But instead of doing it in that fashion, we wrote it as code, we did it in a standardized fashion, and then we just pushed that code and it pushed all the way through to our server. Okay, so catching up with where we are on the instructions here, right? We got the bundle update. We noticed that now when we click the pipeline policies link, we actually see a pipeline policy documented in our system. So I'm going to pause here after step number 10 in pipeline policies before going on to the second half of this lab exercise, just to give people a chance to catch up. Hey, Chris or Ian, how does it look from your end today?
Pretty solid. Having some good conversations around plugin management, configuration as code. Some people were kind of just generally curious about how we can help large-scale enterprise organizations reduce or integrate with third parties in an efficient way, in a secure way, and kind of feeds into a lot of what we've been discussing today around plugin management and configuration as code. These pipeline policies that we're looking at are a great way to stay in compliance or enforce certain organizational best practices within all of your CI/CD workflows. You can think about how important a timeout policy can be for long-running pipelines or pipelines that should run within a certain time frame. Maybe that's 30 minutes, but if there is an edge case or a certain scenario that pipeline that usually runs 30 minutes does go over that, your pipeline policy will recognize that and give you the feedback that you need in the right amount of time. So those are the type of conversations that we're having in the chat. We're fielding some questions around a couple of other things too. But how about you, Chris? Any thoughts?
I think we're looking good.
Beautiful.
All right, thanks, guys. So, hey, let's move ahead with the second half of the pipeline policies exercise. So we're on step number 11 here. So what we're going to do next is go back over to our templated job, right? Because we just put in place a new policy, and what we're going to find out is that not every job that is defined today is compliant with the new policy. Right, so we're going to check that config bundle job, config bundle ops job, and we're going to find that it's going to break. Right, let's show what's going to happen there. So if I go in template jobs, config bundle ops, main, I'm just going to click build it now. I'll click over here to follow the output, and look, this job failed. It failed fast. Right, the reason it failed fast is because the policy engine scans the job definition before the job even runs, and it found the violation. So we didn't have to run the job and get to like that input step and then realize, oh crap, it hasn't timed out. Now we have to fail it. We actually were able to do the policy application up front. And if you look here inside the build block, it actually tells you at the bottom. Remember what I said before about if you come to CloudBees for an interview, one of the questions we're going to ask you or challenge you with is like, hey, here's some error output. What happened? Right? What happened here is you can see it actually tells you that the timeout policy gave you an error and even tells you what needs to happen. So how are we going to fix that? Well, the instructions for how to fix it are back here in the lab. Right? It's going to have us go over to the job definition inside the template, because remember, it's the templated job that is not up to snuff. And we're just going to make a simple edit in the template job. And don't worry as I scroll fast on my screen here. I'm actually going to show you how I make this change in real time. Okay. So I'm going to go back up to my GitHub organization, into my repositories, into the template catalog repo, subdirectory templates, subdirectory cask bundle, Jenkins file. All right, so this is where we're at right now. And inside my Jenkins file, I've already got a timeout here. I've already put a timeout directive. It's just too long, right? Our policy said 30 minutes. My job is doing 60. So good news is this isn't hard to fix. So I'm just going to edit. I click the pencil icon to edit. I'm just going to set this measurement, 60 minutes, to anything that's 30 minutes or less. Right? I'm going to go with 10 minutes. I think the 10 is actually plenty. put in a little commit message here and apply that. Now, again, what I've changed here is my pipeline template catalog. So when I go back over to my CloudBees controller, again, a little bit of paranoia is healthy if you're a sysadmin, right? So I'm going to go check that my template catalog actually pulled the latest change. I'm going to do that by checking the import log. Again, I'm not expecting to have to do anything here. I'm just looking, right? And as I look, I see that it last pulled this catalog at what, 2:23 p.m. Seems like that may have been a little bit too long ago. So I'm going to navigate into my catalog, right? I click this link here in the middle of the screen. I'm going to say import catalog now. Oh.
While Bill's doing that, what's really powerful here is that the pipeline template catalog is managing the different pipelines, different templates that are being used across your entire environment. So if a change is made to one of the pipeline templates, then the controller, the operations center are managing those and updating those. So that change is then propagated to any future runs across your entire environment. That pipeline template catalog is updated where it's needed to and managed by CloudBees.
And think about, there's one really important thing that Chris said there, and that it's the fact that all of the pipelines that are using a given template will be updated, right? And I've been stuck in the unfortunate reality where someone has logged in to Jenkins and has made a change to a pipeline that has caused a production outage or a bug to be released into production, and no one knows why, right? Across shared services, that app dev team who may have made the change, everyone is kind of, poking fingers and running around with their head chopped off. But with something like this, you have governed process when it kind of relates to making updates to your pipeline, and you know that no one's going to be making any UI bound operations. So that part, where not only are we, introducing a new pipeline template, but each and every job that uses that will be updated too. So very, very crucial observation that Chris made there.
Yeah, and by the way, I talk about putting guardrails around the system. The reason I say guardrails instead of the stronger word security, I mean, by the way, it is security also. It's security in the sense of it's preventing unauthorized or inappropriate usage of the system. But that's not the only problem we're guarding against, right? By and large, the developers who are using your shared platform aren't acting in a malicious or inappropriate fashion. The problem is they're just looking at the world through their rose-colored glasses, right? They're overly optimistic about the pipelines they're writing and the changes they're making. And what you're doing with these policies and these guardrails is you're helping protect them from honest mistakes they made, where they're just being too optimistic. They've got those rose-colored glasses on when they look at the world.
I should start wearing those day in, day out.
They're actually not really great for looking at computer monitors. So, hey, as a result of the changes we made, right, we changed the timeout value in our template. So now I'm back in my config bundle ops job, the one that's running based on my template. So I'm going to click build now just to run it again. Remember the last time that we clicked build now, it showed that it failed because of a template violation. All right, so if I go in there to take a look at the logs now, oops, let me click this link. You see this has already gotten off to a good start. Right, it's already done the pipeline policy check. In fact, that's right up here at the top of the build log. Right, policies checked out, so now the job is off and running. And we can let that spin a bit longer. It should run to completion. And there it goes. So just an example of going through kind of the life cycle here of applying a policy, finding that a job is non-compliant with the policy, and then patching it and rerunning it to show that now it all works well. Come back around to my instructions here, right? We saw this message inside the build log that the pipeline policies validated correctly and the job succeeded. Now, I noted before that there's a lot of exercises that are available here on this system and in the documentation we're looking at. It's just these first 3 exercises that we aimed to do today, given the amount of time available, right? Don't really want to go into the others because they take a lot longer than we have scoped. However, like I noted before, these resources will remain available online. This file, this set of documents we're looking at, will be up there. I'm going to say permanently, but never means never, right? But the CloudBees CI servers you're using will be up there at least through the end of the week. So if you want to come back and do some additional exercises in the next few days, hey, great. If you didn't do the exercises in real time today because you just wanted to follow the lesson, that's fine too. You're welcome to come back on your own time and actually work through the exercises. Or if you have colleagues at your company or your organization who want to see what you've done, log in and show them as well. We'll leave it up there for at least the remainder of this week. What I'd like to do then with the remaining time we have in our webinar today is share a little bit more of kind of what are some of the latest features available in CloudBees CI, as well as make sure we have ample time for all 3 of us to help address your questions. Excuse me. So one thing I wanted to come back around to is the topic of active-active replication, because I promised we'd talk about that, right? Now, I don't have a hands-on exercise for it yet. That's something that the 3 of us here on this call are working on in our copious time over at CloudBees, putting together an actual hands-on workshop to help with this, looking to have it available soon. But let me give you kind of the chalk talk overview of what's going on, right? So in CloudBees CI, as well as in Jenkins open source, the idea for a long time has been that each instance of the controller is a singleton, right? There's one copy of that server that sits on top of a file system. And that file system is where Jenkins home lives, right? In Linux world, that's like /var/lib/Jenkins. That's where the configuration for your server lives on disk and where all the files from your jobs are stored in Jenkins home. Excuse me. Now, the idea of having multiple servers sit on top of a shared file system, maybe mounted via NFS mount, is a pretty old idea, right? The challenge, though, has been for many years, if you run multiple copies of the server on top of one Jenkins home, they crash, right? The reason is that these servers all have in-memory state. And when they try to write their files on disk, their in-memory state is not synchronized, so they step on each other's files, right? They overwrite the same files, they corrupt their disk state, and the servers all crash. That's what's happened up until recently when CloudBees sort of unlocked the problem of how to solve for active-active replication. And we did that by actually synchronizing the in-memory representations of what's going on inside the Jenkins servers with a utility called Hazelcast. So now we can have multiple copies of the same controller. They're all sitting on top of the same shared file system. So they got one view of the files, and now they have one consistent view of all their in-memory state. So one controller makes a change in memory, the other controllers get that same update. So when they go to write those files to the file system, they have a coherent state. This is how we enable this technology. And this ability to cluster with active-active replication, I think you can see obviously how this would work with Kubernetes, right? You can have a stateful set, you can have a deployment, but this technology that CloudBees has put together also works with traditional systems. So this could work with, say, 3 VMs, each running a CloudBees CI Jenkins server connected to a shared file system mounted off of like a NetApp filer or something like that. So this works in both your traditional data centers as well as up in Kubernetes in the cloud. So what are some of the things that you can do with active-active replication? Well, one is automatic job distribution, right? So as jobs are being run, say as they're being triggered by webhooks or being run as schedules inside Jenkins, they go through a load balancer that sits in front of this replica set, right? And the jobs will get distributed across all the different replica members. So you're getting load balancing, right? So in my little animation here, I've drawn 4 jobs running simultaneously. But what if you have like 400 jobs running simultaneously, right? That might be the sort of thing that brings a single Jenkins server to its knees. But with this active-active replication, you can have multiple servers at the same time. Now, you might say, well, hey, why don't I just make my Jenkins server bigger? And that reminds me of a saying from Grace Hopper, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, retired from the Navy, one of the pioneers in computing. One of her quips was, back in the old days, when an ox couldn't pull a log because the log was too big, we didn't grow a bigger ox. We lashed 4 oxen together in a team and they pulled the log. So that's kind of what we're doing here with CloudBees CI and Jenkins, right? Instead of trying to grow a Jenkins server ever bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And we routinely work with people who've got open source servers with 96 cores of CPU and 192 gigabytes of RAM, just these monster configurations. You can pretty quickly exhaust what it's reasonable to configure a single server at. Make multiple instances, right? It's like lashing together several ox and having them pull that log jointly, right? Of course, in this case, the log is the many jobs that otherwise a single server is trying to run. Now, of course, another use case here is what happens if one of those controllers does have a problem, right? What if one controller fails due to a bad job running on it? Or maybe the server it's running on fails. That can happen too, even in Kubernetes, right? There's automated failover. Because the servers are all sharing the same configuration, when one of them goes down, the other servers are aware that their mate has been lost, and they'll actually transition the jobs from the lost server over to one of the healthy ones. So from the perspective of the user who's got their job running and is waiting on results, there's no like, oh, your job failed because a server failed, and then you have to decide to restart it. I mean, what if this job runs for 2 hours and you're an hour and a half through? You just lost a lot of time. No, you don't have to restart it. The job actually gets picked up by one of the good instances and keeps on running where it was. There's barely even a pause in the system. I mean, this remapping of the job takes like a half a second or so. And of course, while the new job while the existing job continues running with a new controller managing it, the controller that failed gets restarted. And when it comes up, it will join the replica set again. A third use case, by the way, and I apologize, I don't even have a fancy slide animation for it yet, is auto-scaling. So when you do this in a public Kubernetes service, such as Amazon's EKS or Google GKE or Azure AKS, right, where you can set auto-scaling limits on your cluster, you can set auto-scaling limits on the replicas with CloudBees CI as well, right? Set like a minimum and a maximum number, and then what will happen is CloudBees will run just enough servers based on the actual load of the system. Right, so I've put 3 here in my diagram, but suppose to keep your costs a little bit lower, you say, hey, the minimum number is 2. I want to make sure there's always one as a backup in case there's a failure and there's a failover event, right? But maybe I want my maximum to be 6, right? I want those servers to scale up to provide bandwidth when there's load, right? If a lot of jobs are running, if one of my teams is going through a testing spike, I want to make sure that I can grow my resources to meet their needs so jobs aren't having to queue unnecessarily. So I can do that with the auto scaling, right? So my cluster will grow up to the number of controllers needed based on the load. And then when the load lightens, it will shrink back down to protect my budget. So I'm not paying to keep the lights on for all 6 of those servers 24/7. Ian, I know you work a lot with this too, and Chris, you as well for that matter. I'm curious, what you'd add to my little spiel here about active-active replication.
As I gather my
thoughts.
thoughts.
That was good, Bill. I think that it's. Go ahead, Ian.
No, I was going to say, as I gather my thoughts, I'll let you express yours.
Yeah, I think this is one of the newest, most powerful features that CloudBees has developed. And while CloudBees has delivered over 80% of the code contributions to open source, CloudBees is a very uh, is a very big partner with open source. This is something that is going to stay with CloudBees CI. So this capability of high availability, active is a CloudBees CI unique capability. So it's something that a lot of our customers and CloudBees is very excited about. So it's great to hear about it here.
This is one of those capabilities that can effectively eliminate downtime for your Jenkins or your CloudBees CI cluster, right? Especially when you think about some of the very powerful horizontal scaling capabilities of managed Kubernetes offerings. Obviously, we jump right to the big three cloud providers, but this functions just as well as it does in Azure, AWS, as it does in OCI if you're running OpenShift. So active is a game changer. That's how we see it, and you should too, because we're all in the same boat here. We know what it takes to administer a Jenkins instance. And if you don't, if you're a developer, then go knock on your administrator's door and spend some time with them. But active passive, right, was much harder, create a duplicate infrastructure. This is something that is much more sustainable. And again, is strictly available through CloudBees CI. The load distribution we know is a massive problem for large scale organizations who might have hundreds of controllers. And within those controllers, you might have hundreds, if not thousands of jobs that thousands might not run concurrently, but there's going to be a level of parallelization that you have on a given number of instances in your cluster. And so if you have traditionally had problems with build queue and build time, or just the general practice of horizontal scaling, this is going to be huge for you as a CloudBees customer.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Hey, and one other thought I'd share is, I was talking about, automated failover here. That works great both for unplanned outage. In one sense, that's where you really want the automated failover, right? The things you don't know are going to happen. But there's also an important use case even for planned maintenance windows, right? One of my customers, who was among our first customers to implement this feature on their site, was wrestling with a requirement they had from their IT security organization that they have to rehydrate all their systems deployed in GKE every month, right? And along with that, they're not really changing the application. They're rehydrating the servers in GKE, bringing them up to the latest Kubernetes version. Of course, that means you have to stop the services that are running on all the Kubernetes servers. Well, with CloudBees CI, what that had meant was a planned maintenance window of 3 hours. Now, maybe decades ago, you could say, okay, well, hey, a 3-hour maintenance window. Let's pay our IT folks to come do that on Friday night when no one's working. Well, the challenge is it's not 3 decades ago, right? The way that development works in the 2020s is even small organizations, and certainly big organizations, have developers working all over the world, different countries, different time zones, different day of the week schedules, right? There's not a weekend when you can just put all your maintenance windows and say, oh yeah, there won't be an impact if the service is down for 3 hours if we do it at this time. No, someone's jobs are going to be inconvenienced, whether they're working actively elsewhere around the globe, or if it's just automated jobs and regression tests and stuff like that. So with this automatic failover, what they're able to do is have the CloudBees services running across different node groups inside GKE, inside Kubernetes. And then as they have to drain one node pool to bring it up to the new version of Kubernetes, they have nodes that the services can run on the other node pool. So basically, think of it as like the services themselves are sort of migrating back and forth between these node pools, but there's always at least one copy of the server up and running. So again, to the end user, the maintenance window is now 0. There is a 0 downtime maintenance window for this rehydration process they have to go through. Of course, the sysadmins are busy for 3 hours shepherding the process through, But from the end user's point of view, there's zero interruption to system availability for CloudBees CI. All right. Hey, with that, Chris, Ian, I'd ask if you have any closing remarks. Otherwise, let's hand it back to Cody to wrap us up here, guys.
Fantastic. No, I mean, great job, Bill, covering a lot of the topics presented in the first 3 labs today. Configuration as code was a central theme. And, if you take a look at the webpage that we have our second module listed on, configuration as code remains a central theme kind of throughout our workshop. But just wanted to express our gratitude for your time investment in today's session, all the questions that were asked. I very much appreciate the participation there. Again, these controllers, this environment will be live through the end of the week. So if you did want to come in and explore the managed controller or execute some of the labs that we didn't get to focus on today, please feel free to do so. And again, appreciate your time today.
Yep, I hope everybody enjoyed. Thank you very much.
All right, Cody, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill and Chris, Ian. I really appreciate everything that you guys brought to the table as well today. This has been such an awesome workshop, and I feel like I know a whole lot more about the CloudBees platform as a whole, way more than I did before. So I really appreciate you guys joining us on Techstrong Learning and really diving deep into this with us. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Have a great day, everyone.
Before I let our audience go, just a couple of closing reminders. This session was recorded, and we will be sending it to you via email here as soon as it becomes available, because I know it is imperative that a lot of you may want to pick up and continue on with these modules. Outside of that email, you can also find it living on the DevOps website, devops.com/webinars, and it will be in the on-demand section. Additionally, we will be reaching out to 2 of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So if you weren't as active in the chat or Q&A, feel free to fill out that post-webinar survey pinned to the top of the chat, and that will also qualify you for our giveaway. I'd like to thank CloudBees for sponsoring our program. And to everyone here, thank you so much for your participation. We really appreciate the questions that everyone brought to the table, and I know our speakers really appreciate being able to help you on this kind of intimate, personal basis. So we really appreciate all of you following along and being part of this workshop with us. With that, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong Learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again to Bill, Chris, and Ian.
Take care, everyone.